Welcome to season 13 of the Parenting Aces Podcast, a proud member of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week's episode is dealing with a very difficult topic, one that you parents and coaches may want to watch or listen to without children being present first before determining whether it's appropriate to share with them. We are going to be talking about abuse, physical, sexual, emotional abuse by a tennis coach toward a junior tennis player. And we are talking pretty frankly about the topic. I am going to be interviewing Stevie Gould, who is a recent graduate of University of San Francisco, actually going on to play another year of college tennis due to the COVID eligibility rules. And Stevie was a victim of sexual abuse by his junior tennis coach. It started at a very young age and continued for several years before he was able to tell his parents and get out of the situation. And again, we talk very frankly. This is not an easy one to listen to. It certainly was not an easy one to record, but it's an important one and one that I hope you will listen to and take heed of, and then utilize the resources that we're sharing in the show notes that you can find on our website or anywhere that you consume this podcast. Stevie is amazingly honest, amazingly forthcoming in our conversation, and I want to just say thank you to him and thank you to his parents for raising such an incredible young man and for being there for him when he did finally find the ability to tell them what was going on in his life. So I'm not going to say anything else. I want to just segue right into the episode. But again, please listen to this without children present first. And then if you decide you want to share it, by all means, share it. But it is very raw, very honest, very frank. It is so nice to meet you, Stevie Gould, and so happy to have you on the podcast. And really, I don't want to say looking forward, but feel like our conversation today is an important one. And I'm looking forward to leaving this conversation feeling like we are giving families some useful, actionable information.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. It gives me a chance to tell my story, which is always a gift. So,
well, I'm glad you look at it that way. As you and I talked offline before before today, it's always tricky to ask someone who has gone through what you've gone through to tell the story one more time, right?
yeah.
And you assured me that telling your story is cathartic and helpful for you. So I'm just going to run with that, and we're going to jump right into this conversation.
That sounds like a plan.
All right. So, Stevie Gould, please give our audience a little bit of your tennis story so everybody knows who you are and why you're here today.
Well, my tennis story starts I was 5, which sounds like forever ago for me, but I know a lot of kids start so young, and I'm only 23, so it's not that long ago, I guess. But I started just with my dad. Like, we would take a basket of balls out to the court, bring the dog out there too. The dog would chase the balls and lay on the court, and I only played with my dad for, I think, at least first 3 years. Like, I don't even know if I really played with anyone else that much at all. It was just my dad and I out there, and it was a way for us to spend quality time. I guess, my mom always jokes that my tennis story started way before that, because when she would ask him to take me out on like walks and get me exercise in the stroller and all that, he would take me down to the public tennis courts and park me on the side of the court. And he would go play pickup games of tennis with his friends. which I don't think he told her till later, but that was kind of where it started. It was just being in the stroller, looking from side to side, watching the ball go by. Um, yeah, so I started that when I was 5 and started playing there. I didn't really play competitions until I was, I think, 11, 10 or 11 was my first one, which was a little bit late for kids that are usually like try and play a high level. But yeah, I think it was usually for the best, and I learned to love it. I was a nervous wreck when I started playing tennis. I remember that as far as going back in my tennis story. I would like throw up and cry before all my matches when I was like 9, no, 10, 11 kind of thing. But yeah, I did the whole junior tennis circuit. That whole route. I was always really horrible in the 12s and got a little bit better in the 14s. And then I grew a little bit in the 16s and 18s and started having some decent results there. And I guess my claim to fame is I was able to play a few. I got a wild card into a couple of challenger events in the qualies where I got to my ass kicked, which was great. So much fun in the hometown challenger. But that was such a special experience. And between all the national events and all that, I was able to get a scholarship to University of Washington to go play D1 there, which was an amazing experience. It didn't work out because I ended up transferring, which is a whole nother thing that we could have a whole nother podcast on about picking the right school and not committing early and how to do the recruiting process and all that, but that'll be for another day. But I transferred from there back to University of San Francisco, which is pretty much where I'm from. I'm from San Francisco, the Bay Area, Marin County specifically, which is just north of San Francisco. And yeah, I played my next 3 years there, finished out, graduated, which is great. Parents were stoked on that. And then I was done. I figured I was done with tennis and might start coaching a little bit and hearing this and that. But I was given a call from the coach at St. Mary's College over in the East Bay in California, which is another D1 school, actually the rival of University of San Francisco, funny enough. And like, yeah, we had we have an opportunity to potentially recruit you. And I don't know if you know this, but with COVID and all that mess, like you have 6 years to complete 5 years of eligibility instead of 5 years to complete 4. So I got roped back into doing one more year of college tennis next year. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been fun getting back into it. Definitely a different perspective on tennis at 23 years old and 18. A lot can change. So I'm pretty excited to see where that takes me. And then after that, who knows? We'll see
Yeah,
where. But yeah, that's the story.
I love it. What did you major in?
I majored in psychology, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Was a finance major for the first 2 years and then decided to do a real 180 psychology when I learned I didn't like math. So see.
And psychology because
That'll definitely dive us into our conversation today because I think my original decision to study psychology was a lot to have a better idea about how to figure myself out and all the crazy stuff going on up here. And also to try and learn how to help others that have been in my situation. I mean, at that point, I'd already been, and we'll talk more about it, but I'd already been involved in the lawsuit and the criminal trial and with my former coach, and there was a lot of stuff going on, and I've been really exposed to not just the issues that it presented for myself, but the issues that it presented for a lot of other kids that have been through similar situations and other people of all ages. And I think learning how to best react, best help myself, best help other people was really, really intriguing to me. So decided to study it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so now that you've been cryptic, let's dive into what you're talking about
Yeah.
and the real underlying reason for this conversation, which is that during your junior years, you had a coach who physically abused you, sexually abused you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Starting at what age?
Starting when I was 13.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long had you been with the coach prior to the abuse starting?
Uh, I started when I was 11. So I started working with him when I was 11. I think I always speak about it as the abuse started at 13, but it definitely started before that because there's this whole grooming process that we will go into further as well. But it doesn't go from 0 to 100. Like there's a very, very gradual incremental increase in abuse and dependency. Dependency is huge. Where the abuser, the perpetrator, really like just turns up the volume on the abuse and the dependency very slowly, and so it's very hard to perceive. Because obviously, if you jump into freezing cold water or you jump into boiling hot water, it's like you jump out and you figure that out pretty quick. But when it gets turned up on you very slowly, it's a lot harder to notice where you're at and how to get out of that situation.
Okay, so I'm going to just say this is not going to be a fun conversation. It's not going to be a fun one to have. It's not going to be a fun one to watch or listen to, but it is an important one. And parents, if you're taking this in, please keep an open mind. Please understand that Stevie comes from a loving family with parents who were attentive, who were dialed in, who did everything right. And this still happened.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
So yeah, I think that's important for
I agree.
people to hear and understand.
Yeah.
That said, your parents entrusted you to the care of a junior tennis coach from the age of 11, who, as it turns out, was a really bad human. And I want to know from your perspective where this started at age 11 and what the progression was to the full-fledged abuse.
Yeah.
And well, let's just start there.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a good place to start. The coach, his name was Antonio or Normandy Burgos, went by a bunch of names. That's a whole another story. But Coach Burgos ran a non-for-profit academy in Sausalito, where he was supported by the community, given access to these courts, given access to coach children. A bunch of the high schools would refer all of their high school tennis players to his academy. It was a non-for-profit organization in an area that is Marin County is one of the most affluent counties in, as you know, as my parents probably know, super wealthy. And so it's like this huge deal that's like he's giving, he's able to give out scholarships to underprivileged kids, making more tennis accessible. Just like the halo was around his organization, around him. And he had been accused and tried for molestation, sexual abuse before in 2008. It was, I believe, when that trial was, and got acquitted on a hung jury. And so it turned into this whole it was a phobia. It was a phobia of there was a homosexual phobia. That's how they kind of spun it. It's like this kid and these people that were accusing him were homophobic. And
because Coach Burgos is homosexual himself.
He was openly gay. Yeah.
Okay.
And so there was this whole fallout from that. But his academy gained momentum afterwards because he gained support of the community. He was given, after that whole 2008 trial, he was given teacher of the year as PE teacher. Yeah, it was just this whole fiasco. If you want more information on it, it is all over the internet. It was crazy. There was a lot of different trials against the school district, obviously against the United States Tennis Association. But that's how we got it. We got referred to it by dozens of parents who, because my parents never really, they never really said, oh, we're going to go pay for these private lessons for you. It's ridiculous. It's like, you can have fun and play tennis and, work hard at it. But it's like, they never really, my mom always wanted me to be a well-rounded person and try a bunch of different things and try athletics and try music and school and this and that. And I just was like, tennis. So it was never in the cards to spend all this money to try and go pro or to try and get to college or whatever. So this coach offered me a full scholarship, everything paid for, all training, private lessons, 3 times a week, everything paid for. It was like this absolutely amazing opportunity. My parents were skeptical, and I will never forget all my parents, because they were familiar with the 2008 trial as well. Like, this is an amazing opportunity. You always promise to talk to us if he ever makes you feel uncomfortable. And for the first years of the lessons, I mean, my parents they were always there with me. I couldn't drive myself, whatnot. And they were always there. But again, I just started, I mean, this was like my opportunity to achieve all the dreams that I could possibly want. It was like college tennis, Division I tennis, professional tennis. Without this guy, those dreams simply like weren't feasible. And he played into that. Like
And again, you were 11 at
I was
this
11.
point.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
slightly impressionable at 11 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, so that sort of at 11, this guy became like my hero, my ticket to success, like this amazing mentor, this like super respected person, all these different adjectives you could use. And so I started spending a ton of time with him, and we were working hard, and it was like he was a tough coach. Like he would push you really, really hard. And so he started pushing me really, really, really hard physically and mentally, because tennis is 90% mental, as we all know, being, tennis parents and players and whatnot. And so the psychological abuse that he put me through for the first few years in order to groom me, in order to be able to sort of put up with the sexual abuse, if that makes sense, is he would spin that off as like, this is tennis training. And from the entirety of the abuse, it was like, this is tennis training. Like this is to make you better as a player. And like, this is to strengthen our relationship as a player and coach, as messed up as that was. And so there were a lot of different ways that he spun it. But yeah, it definitely escalated from physical overwork, overtraining, abuse, to psychological abuse as a 12-year-old, really tearing me down in any way I could, in any way he could. And the big one that
Give us some specifics with that, though. When you say physical abuse and psychological abuse, can you give examples of things he would say or do?
Oh, I mean, I'd be on the court hitting side to side until I threw up all the time at 12, 11. There was
Because he was yelling at you to do that, or I mean,
just there wasn't
why
an
would
option. Do you want to win? Do you
that was
want to be
coming
good at
from
this?
him? That
Yeah.
was coming
Do you
from the
want to win? Do
coach.
you want to be good at this? And you have to realize, like, he played into all of my strengths and weaknesses. I think that as people, we have a very defined definition in our heads, as far as like what weakness looks like, and what weaknesses can be exploited versus what strengths look like. And especially when that comes to kids, like which kids are strong, which kids are vulnerable. And he took all of the things that you might consider strong, and he played those to his favor. He took like my work ethic, my discipline, my aspirations to achieve success in the sport, my loyalty, all these different qualities that you might peg as like positive character traits, and the work ethic, discipline, all these things, he used those to isolate me from other people and to make me more vulnerable, more susceptible to being abused. Because all he had to say was, well, that without me, I'm your ticket. You're not going to achieve this. Okay. Well, I'm like, okay, good. Well, all these different things about how tough you are. Well, when you start being sexually abused and you feel weak, okay, well, if this is making me feel weak, well, toughen up. I guess this is one of the reasons why I need to get tougher. Right. And it's just, there's all these different stereotypes I feel like we have in our heads about what a predator, like a sexual predator, might prey upon, or who's vulnerable. And we have to realize that that has to be thrown completely out the window. These perpetrators, or as we would mention it with the law firm, is like, these guys are professionals. Like there's no other way that they can get away with what they do, skirting the law, um, if they're not extremely competent at what they do, at taking advantage of young children. And so you have to know that they're going to take advantage of a kid no matter what character traits he has or she.
Mm-hmm. And so you said your parents were taking you to practices.
Mm-hmm.
Were they watching as you were doing these side-to-side drills until you
No.
puked?
No. That was definitely saved for times when I was alone with him. That was something that kind of gradually increased. He was always firm, tough, but supportive when my parents were around, and then abusive when I was alone with him. And my parents both worked. There were times when it's like I'm telling them this is an amazing opportunity, this is a great thing, and eventually, okay, we have to drop you off at this practice, and go to work and come pick you up, um, or it's like dropping you off with you and other kids. Other kids were there, other parents were there, and if my parents weren't there, it was it was I was free game, I guess. Um, and yeah, that's definitely how that kind of started. But
So, I mean, it sounds to me, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but
Mhm.
it sounds to me like the coach was able to build trust
Yeah,
between not only you and him, but your parents and
my
him.
parents and the community. There was a
And
huge trust in the community from him.
right. And so because he was able to build that trust,
Hmm.
then your parents felt comfortable dropping you at practice, as we all do.
Yeah,
This is the coach. We've done our due diligence. We've seen him in action. We've spent enough time around him to feel comfortable that our kid is in good hands. Okay, it's fine for us to leave him for a few hours, go
yeah.
do what we need to do, and then come back. So this is not any shortcoming on the part of your parents. Your parents did what they were supposed to do.
I think if there's one thing that I still I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about this being, a gift to tell my story. If there's one thing that just eats me alive inside and is so unbelievably difficult to talk about, it is anything to do with this situation and my parents. Like it's like we can talk about my story all day, but I know how much this ate them alive and how difficult it was on our relationship when this all came out. And to know, to even have to talk about the fact that they potentially might have done anything wrong was just such, oh my God, it just gives me such a pit in my stomach. And yeah, it's hard. I really would like to convey this to all the parents that might be listening. It's like, I mean, I'm an only child as well. Like all eyes were on me. There wasn't
Yeah.
really that much distraction. There's gosh, I just, I know that they every day they wish they had never ever left me alone, or they were on me 5 times a day about, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe in this practice? Do you feel safe at school? Do you feel safe in this situation? That. But at the end of the day, it's like you also have to give your kid a little bit of freedom, and you can't watch their every single move. And as a teenage boy, it's like all I wanted was to be my own person and to gain independence and to be training hard with a coach and to have like my progress on my own, not having mommy and daddy watching me at practice, picking up the balls for me. Hey, do you need any more water? You know, like that's what I wanted. And my parents, I was always very independent when it came to my tennis. Like I wanted this to be my success, not theirs. And these were my dreams and my goals, not theirs. My mom forgot to sign me up for a tournament one time when I was 10. From that point on, it was like, I am signing myself for every tournament. I am regripping my rackets. I'm stringing my own rackets. I will get the balls, all these different things. It was all of this independence. Um, I just want to convey that to all the parents out there. That's like my parents were giving me the absolute best opportunity that they knew how for success, for independence, to learn these lessons on my own. Um, and were there for me every step of the way, every single night. Um, and if I had had the courage or had the nerve or the whatever you want to call it to be able to speak up, I could speak up.
Mhm.
And I didn't. And that's something that will go into another further on in the podcast,
Yeah.
but I really would just like to convey that to everyone. Something that definitely weighs on me more than almost anything else, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
That's
lot.
difficult to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
it's difficult to hear because I'm sure your parents are, you know, how do you
Yeah.
move past this, right?
It's
It's
one thing to have it happen to yourself, but to blame yourself for your child. I
right,
don't have kids yet, obviously, but I can just the thought of like if my child was abused like this, like I can't imagine how difficult that would be.
right, right. All right. Let's back up a
Continue.
little. Yeah, let's back up a little. Okay, so the psychological abuse starts, the physical, not the sexual, but the non-sexual physical abuse
Yeah,
starts by
11,
working you
12.
really hard,
Mhm.
11, 12.
Yeah.
What was, I mean, at that point, I'm guessing you had no feeling that something was awry here. You thought,
No.
this is how a coach player
Yeah,
relationship is supposed to be.
absolutely.
He's got my best interest at
Yeah.
heart. He knows my goals for my
Right.
sport. He's helping me get there.
Yeah.
I'm committed. He's committed. My
Yeah.
parents are on board. This is all good. I'm going to keep doing what he tells me.
Perfectly
At
said.
some
Yeah.
point, though, it transitions from non-sexual physical abuse to sexual physical abuse. How old were you and what was the first thing that happened?
I was 13 and I got injured. Um,
On through tennis or
through
some other
tennis,
kind of way?
through
Okay.
tennis. Unfortunately, very conveniently for him, I had a strain in my groin. That led to stretching. We would always stretch. So he would help stretch me out, as all coaches and physios do after practices, especially one-on-one. You watch any of the pro matches, they're all stretching with their trainers and their physios and coaches afterwards. So I was completely used to him stretching me out. Now he's stretching around my groin area. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see where this is headed, right?
Right.
And so it just became like the most gradual inappropriate touching into more inappropriate touching into groping into all of a sudden what happened was he said with proof, like all the best players get body work done.
Mhm.
Body work was the term he used, massage work, basically. you know, I'm working so hard at this point. I'm, 13 and I'm getting injured constantly. I'm like growing. I'm having growing pains and all this other stuff, and everything's kind of breaking down because I'm playing for 5 hours a day as hard as I possibly can. And so he's like, you need body work. It's going to allow you to train better. It's going to allow you to play better. It's going to allow you to do all these things, and you're going to be able to do this. You need to do body work, and I'm fully capable of doing body work on you. But you need to come back to my apartment so we can do body work, because that's where I have like my massage table and everything like that.
Did your
One thing led to
parents know
another.
about this?
No, no.
This was
And
just
I didn't
between
know.
you and coach.
And this is, oh yeah. And this is when I was like, okay, this feels fishy. I feel
Mhm.
extremely uncomfortable, but it's like a deer in the headlights. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, it's just like, this feels horrible. This feels really off. What the hell is going on? But I can barely walk. I need to run. I have sectionals, nationals next week. I'm a 5-star. I want to be a blue chip. I'm like on the cusp. I need to get that done. I'm starting to talk about, college coaching and high schools and this and that and blah 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 blah. Okay, let's do it.
Mhm.
And then
This is
in
part of
that,
what it's going to take for me
yeah,
to get
yeah,
to what I want to do.
yeah. This
Yeah.
is everyone. All of his private lessons were done at his apartment complex.
Mhm.
There were tons of adult players, kid players coming in and out, teaching it or getting lessons from his condo complex, back and forth. I'm of course like the special kid on scholarship, so I'm getting a lesson and then helping him with another lesson, hitting in, and then after that, that's in the morning, and then after that we go get lunch. This is all summertime. So
Mhm.
summertime is when things really started, where I started to spend like full days with him basically. Um go get lunch, then go to the group practices in the afternoon in Sausalito. Completely good, great rhythm. Everything's working right. I'm playing twice a day, all these different things. So it was like, okay, well, we just need to go back to my apartment. We'll just get lunch at my apartment and we'll do body work there. I had been back to his apartment to grab water. He needed to walk the dogs, to get some lunch. Super innocent stuff. And then we go to
Yeah.
practice. No big deal. Then all of a sudden, okay, a massage, body work, completely innocent. Was great. Actually really helped. Like was able to run again. But then it just started to get more and more inappropriate. And one thing turned to the next, and it was like massage table. I mean, he had all the tricks in the book that I'm sure he used on myself and other kids because I was not the only victim. Massage table, and then my dog peed on the massage table. Like, can you even make this up, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
my dog peed on the massage table. Why don't you just lay down on the couch? Something like that. Or the bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's more comfortable, right? I have more access to be able to stretch you. It's like it was so calculated. Every single movie made was so gradual and so calculated. And looking back on it, it's like when I was going through the police report and everything and giving that report to the police, it was like, wow, it's like the guy didn't miss a step.
Mm.
And it's really scary to think about, but it's like kind of that's what we're up against.
Right.
You know?
So the first time he touched you inappropriately, did alarm bells go off in your head? I mean, you're 13.
I'm
You're old
13.
enough to
Yeah.
understand inappropriate touching. I'm
Yeah, but I
sure,
didn't know what sex was.
right.
Like
But
I hadn't even, I really hadn't had sex ed yet. And if
yeah,
we even in the sex ed that we had, it wasn't like um everyone was just too busy screwing around to actually pay attention to what was going on. So it's like I
right.
didn't even know what was physically going on.
Yeah. Okay.
It just felt wrong.
So there was no, at that point, you're like, okay, well, this is just part of the process to heal my groin injury, get me
Yeah.
back doing what I need to be doing. It didn't at that point feel like something you needed to share with your parents because the coach is telling you, I'm certified to do this or I'm qualified to do this. This is part of the procedure that we need to go through.
It's a good question, and actually to back up a little bit for more context for everyone listening too is I think it's really important to know at this point I am completely isolated. So this is like we're deciding uh I'm deciding to go to an independent school, not the regular high school when I do go over the summer, practices twice a day, all this. I didn't have a friend in my phone that I could call that I felt like I had time to hang out with. My life revolved around waking up, going to play tennis with this guy, playing matches, having him take me to tournaments, going home, eating, sleeping, recovering, and doing it all again. And that was that's I think the most important aspect of grooming that these perpetrators do is they isolate their victims from the rest of the world, from loved ones, from friends. I had a best friend that I played doubles with, and he somehow, another huge regret, somehow convinced me that I'm too good to be playing doubles with this guy. I should be playing with someone else. It's lonely at the top. He's a rival. You can't be good friends with your rivals. And so I just played doubles with another guy. We had a falling out. We were all family friends. Our families had falling outs. It
Oh,
was this
wow.
horrible situation. Sorry for the
You're
sirens
fine.
coming by.
I can't
Um,
even hear them. You're good.
um, and there goes my best friend,
Hmm.
right? And
So
so
this
now
was all calculated by
this
the
is all
coach.
calculated. Yeah,
Yeah.
he got rid of my best friend. He got rid of I had an Instagram account. He told me, good players aren't distracted by stuff like that. Got rid of my Instagram account, which was obviously, social media connection to other people. I didn't have time to spend everyone who went to hang out after school. You think I had time for that? It's like, no, we don't have time for that. I was going to go to an independent school, so I wasn't going to even see my friends at school. So I had no one to talk to
Hmm.
besides my parents, no one to call. And so I was like, well, this is it. This is all I have.
Right.
I could go cry to mommy or cry to daddy, But then where does that leave me? I'm not going to go to college for D1. I'm not going to go pro. I'm not going to get to be a blue chip. I'm not going to be great at tennis. My backhand's going to suck. My serve's going to suck. All this stuff is going to happen. And that was the end of the world for me at that time. I was 13. It's like my
Yeah.
life revolved around my tennis success. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, Stevie, and something that we talk about quite often on this podcast and elsewhere in Parenting Aces is helping your child understand that they are not their tennis,
yeah,
that tennis is something they do, it's not who they are.
that's fantastic. Yeah.
And it's a tough kind of line to navigate, because if your child is on this pathway to becoming a high performance tennis player, whatever that means for them, then there's a certain amount of commitment and dedication and hard work and time and money that needs to go into that. But also, they've got to have decompression time and space. And this coach took that from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a
Okay.
doubt. And it happens, like you said, it happens in so many other situations for
Yeah.
so many other reasons. Because tennis is such a time-consuming technical sport. It's like it can be all encompassing in a child's life. And I think that that's really dangerous.
Yeah. And not to go back to this, but I think we have to, is, you know, in your parents' mind, what was going on? They obviously had no clue about the sexual abuse. Did they have any clue about the psychological or other physical abuse?
That's a good question as well. And I think that that's where going back to what you just said is really important, is it the all-encompassing, IMG tennis academies, and where tennis is life and you're training for 6 hours a day and the coaches are so tough on the kids and all this stuff, it's normalized, completely normal. Like if playing 3 times a day or whatever it might have been, or like the the psychological abuse that's just spun off as like, we're preparing you for a tough tennis match,
Yeah.
isn't normalized, then maybe a lot more alarm bells would have gone off. But it's like the whole psychological and physical abuse, like it didn't differ at all between
This is what high performance kids do.
This is what high performance, this is what it takes
Yeah.
to be a pro.
Yeah.
Like look at Andre Agassi's book and all these other different situations of
Yeah.
like, this is kind of what it takes to get to that level.
Yeah.
It's like, well, are you a gambling person? It's like, what are you gambling with? It's like, it's your child's psychological well-being. It's the relationship between the child and the parent, or the child and whoever's pushing them that hard. It's their childhood at stake, the friendships that they might potentially make versus miss out on, education. It's a lot to throw on the table.
Yeah. Okay. So 13, the sexual abuse starts. How long did that continue before you realized this is not okay? This is not normal. I need to tell somebody what's going on. I need to get out of this situation.
I think, and this is kind of the scary part for, myself, and I feel like parents in general, I feel like it only lasted like a month or a couple of months before it was like, this is horribly wrong. This is extremely inappropriate. And then
to
for
be
me to
clear,
realize,
it progressed beyond just the massages.
yes,
Okay.
it progressed.
And we don't have to go into the
Okay.
details of it, but I mean,
it's important to know that this was not just like some inappropriate touching, because that's a lot of these cases and a lot of these big giant trials is like, it's a huge deal when it's inappropriate touching. But this was like, I was being raped for 3 years, hundreds and hundreds of times.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I can't even hear that I know. Getting chills.
I know.
Okay.
But by the time I was being full on raped, it was, of course, I'm like, I know what sex is at this point. So we figure that out. And then now I start realizing this is a crime. Doing my little research on Google as a 13-year-old. And it's like, oh, this is this isn't love. This isn't what he was saying. This is love. Love comes in special circumstances and special relationships. He tried to sell me hook, line, and sinker on a lot of these things, and it's so embarrassing to talk about. But as a teenage boy, there's nothing more embarrassing when you're trying to be super macho and uh, independent and big and strong and cool, and it's like, oh, you're being sexually taken advantage of by a gay man.
Yeah.
It's like you wonder why no one comes out. It's like middle schoolers are brutal, high schoolers are brutal. What do you think they would do with that? Are you
Right.
kidding me? I mean, it's just, yeah. So it's important to know there's a reason why kids don't come out. But I feel like I knew that everything was illegal and inappropriate, and this was a horrible situation within, a couple of months. But it was like at that point, I was so invested in the whole situation, and for two reasons, I was like, well, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And that's what he's been preaching to me this whole time. And that's what everyone says is the key to success is like, are you willing to do whatever it takes?
Mhm.
And now I'm like, well, okay, he's providing me everything I need to get to that level, but he's putting me through hell. Well, are you willing to go through hell to do this? And I was like, all right, yeah. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, my other option is get myself out of hell, but I might throw myself into another hell because now the whole world knows that I was taken advantage of and raped. Like I didn't know what was worse.
Yeah. How do you live with that as
How do you
a
live with that?
teenage kid? Yeah.
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 How do you go talk to your crush in the hallway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you talk to your parents?
How do you talk to your parents?
And
I
so
yeah.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to start to say, well, that's a good segue into, how do you talk to your parents? And I was going to start talking about, when I did come out, I came out to my parents. I came out to my mother. I don't know if you want to dive into that now.
Yeah. Yes. No, let's do it.
It's like, how do you talk to your parents? It literally had to be lined up and given to me on like a silver platter. I remember I got kicked out of practice by Burgos because at this point I'm 15-ish, 15 and a half, and I'm extremely sassy and sarcastic and combative as any 15-year-old boy would be. Plus, I'm hiding some insecurities here and there with all this.
And it's all still going on.
It's all still going on.
Okay.
We
So
have,
let
yeah.
me just ask this question. Did you, and I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but did you feel like because you were going along with the hell he was putting you through, that earned you some leeway when it came to your behavior when you were around other people?
I think I was just lashing out.
Okay.
You can imagine like the last thing I wanted was for anyone to see beneath the exterior.
Sure.
So it was like all I wanted, just everything was about creating this image of perfection, the golden boy, great grades, great athletics, super fit, super strong, try to be super good looking, all this other stuff. It's like, just how can I, on this exterior, super cocky, unbelievably cocky. I'm so embarrassed of it, but it's just like, it's like I had to be so cocky that no one in a million years would ever think that there was something this kid was hiding, or that this kid, which at the point it's like I was the most insecure person on earth. Um, and and so sorry, I forgot where I was going with that.
So
But
you said it all had to be teed up, handed
yes.
to you on a platter.
So I got kicked out of practice, and that's why, my behavioral issues were starting to act up and whatnot, especially with him. I started to get a little bit more talk back with him and conflict, because I hated him. I hated him with everything I had. Got kicked out of practice. Mom picked me up at practice, and went, like, why are you getting kicked out of practice? And I was like, well, because I told him some nasty things. And she's like, he's given you so much. I know that he's hard on you, but you need to be respectful. And my parents had always taught me to be really, really respectful. And it's like, I know he's pushing you hard, but like, she was going along with what I had told her I wanted.
Yeah.
And I said, you want to know how hard he is on me? And then I told her what he's been doing.
Wow. In
And
the
I told
car,
her, no, no,
like
no.
on the car ride home,
On the
this was
car ride home,
happening?
I said, you want to know how hard he's been on me? He so hard on me that he does this psychological abuse, this, the physical abuse, and then he's tried this, the sexual abuse. And I didn't tell her that it actually happened. I couldn't get myself to say that it actually happened. And when we got home, and it was obviously a car ride, it was quite a car ride. Um, we got home, before we got out of the car, I just remember her stopping and before we got out and saying, I can't imagine like how hard it is to think about this, but like I just hope like if anything like that, no matter how difficult or how embarrassing did happen to you, you can always talk to us about it. And I just kind of broke down and said, I think I was crying or something like that, but I was just like, yeah, it did happen. It actually did. And I never really went into the details of what happened as far as like, the gritty details I would have to talk to the police about with my parents, just because if I was, it just, I don't know. That would be a little bit too much. I don't know. Um, but yeah, yeah, I told him it had been happening for a long time, and somehow my mom kept it together, and we went to the police station. My parents called Burgos, and he
What was
picked
the
up
timeline on that? Like once you
next
told
day.
them how,
Next
okay.
day. Next day they called him and said, "We know what's been going on," and hung up. Uh, yeah, and then that was kind of the start of a whole lot. And we went to the police, and they advised us on all of our next steps to not actually blow things up because we didn't want to, spark this huge thing without evidence, which was
Mhm.
so difficult to kind of keep our mouths shut as the investigation was going on. And so the police investigation was at least another like 7, 8 months of like
Wow.
he was just roaming free, doing all of his things. He would still take every time I would win matches, he would like post about it on Facebook and take credit for my wins. Yeah, because he didn't want anyone to know that I had left or that anything was up. It was nuts. It was nuts.
What was your story about why you were no longer training with him?
I don't remember.
Okay.
If I told you, I think I would be kind of making things up a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
The general rule of thumb is like, he was an a-hole. I
Hmm.
don't know. Like that
Yeah.
was kind of what
You
I
just
would
butted
say.
heads or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, we butted
Yeah.
heads way too much. It was just like I
Yeah.
wanted to do my own thing. It was just like, yeah, he wasn't a nice person.
And you were 15.
I was, I think, closer to 16 at this point. I know that
Okay.
this was now, I don't even remember really age wise. I just remember this was like my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the investigation ensues.
Yeah.
There's a criminal trial. He's arrested. There's a criminal trial.
There's a sting operation before all that, before he's
Mhm.
arrested. Like I had to go back undercover to meet with him in order to gain incriminating evidence.
Were
Um,
you wired or
yeah, I was wired. I was wired. They're like snipers on the roof. It was
good
wild.
Lord? And you're
Yeah, it was wild.
16, 15,
Close,
16
yeah,
having to
close to
do
16. Didn't have my driver's license, but the police had me drive there and back.
really?
Almost got into a car. This is where it starts being somewhat enjoyable to speak about, because this is the kind of thing that I'm really proud about. It's something that I'm really proud of, to be able to hopefully like to be able to take him off of the streets, and to be able to hopefully in this way protect other kids from being abused by the same person. Is like there was the whole sting operation, and I was playing all these tournaments while I was having to do the sting operation, which meant like talking
Holy
to him over the
moly.
phone. I remember being in Louisiana for nationals, talking to him over the phone, under the pretense that, I miss our relationship and I miss what we had. And I want to find a time to meet up with you and to get back to coaching and all this. And so we're trying to schedule times to meet that would work, that would be away from my parents, if I can borrow the car, steal the car, to meet up with him and all this. And so I had to meet up with him twice, wired, with like pinhole cameras in my in my clothing, and it was nuts. Yeah, there was he at the very end of the second meeting, he kind of realized what was happening because he wanted me to get back in his car and go to his apartment. Um, again, as just like old times. And I refused to get in his car, and I like hurriedly jumped in my car and drove off. And so he started chasing me in the car. And so then like the police were in my ear telling me to gain space so that they can intercept without getting me involved. And then yeah, it was a wild situation. But yeah.
Holy moly. Okay. And
Yeah.
so at that point, he had not been arrested.
No. Yeah.
The police are in their evidence gathering phase. Once they did have the evidence they needed
Yeah.
and he was arrested,
Yeah.
what was your role moving forward in prosecuting him?
It was a really long process setting a criminal trial date. The parent, I mean, for any parents have ever had to deal with this, it's the the perpetrators try and push things off as long as possible just to try and, I mean, people they wear down. It's just it's a lot to be stressed about, where it's like, oh, we have the trial date set for April 15th, and then all of a sudden, no, now it's September 15th, and then now it's like it's an insane process.
Was
Um,
he in jail during this
yeah, he
time
was in
or he
jail
was
at this
okay?
time. Yeah, he was in jail. And yeah, eventually we had the criminal trial date, and my job was to just, at this point I'm a senior in high school, so it was at least 2 years down the road, and my job was just to testify, and to be on the stand as one of the key witnesses, obviously. And I was on the stand for 11 hours, like over the course of 3 days. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was worth it. It was definitely a difficult situation. I mean, it was obviously difficult for me, but I could imagine how difficult it was for my father, who was waiting in the lobby for
Mhm.
11 hours over the course of 3 days, so
So
it's
you
just,
testified in private
yeah, yeah.
because you were a
No,
minor?
no, no.
Is that
It was in
why?
front of the jury. It was in front of a jury. It
Okay.
was in front of the jury. It was in There were people in the crowd. It was in front of Burgos. But I think I told my dad I feel more comfortable if you didn't have to listen to the details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. And you said you were one of the key witnesses. Were there other children that were testifying that he
Yeah.
had abused as well?
Yeah. I
People
believe.
that you knew?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
I'd
was
rather not
there
go into details with that because I just don't want to expose any of their privacy.
no, no,
But
no, no,
yeah.
no, no, no. What I was going to ask is, at some point, were you able to sit down with any of them
Yeah.
and kind of hash through all of this stuff?
Yeah. I like to think that I've built a meaningful relationship with at least a couple of other ones. Um, another victim, the victim in the 2008 case, actually, he went public as well in the New York Times. It's an amazing article called "The Protector," and he's been absolutely inspiring in the way that he's responded to his abuse back in 2008. He became a district attorney, and he focused on sex crimes, putting away sex criminals, in order in his response to his situation, where he was the one that came forward and the jury was and Burgos was acquitted on a hung jury,
Mhm.
and everyone blamed him for being homophobic, which I cannot imagine the trauma that brought with it. I mean,
Yeah.
my situation was unbelievably traumatic, and it went perfectly, if that makes any sense. It was like
Yeah.
I came out, my parents loved me, believed me. Anyone I told loved me, believed me, supported me. Police treated me wonderfully, helped me the whole way. Lawyers treated me well. I won the case. He went to prison for 250 years. We got into a lawsuit. We won that. All these different things went perfectly for me, and I was still messed up in the head. It's like I cannot
How could
imagine.
you not be?
Right, but my point is like it just goes to show how unbelievably traumatic these situations are. It's like I can't imagine what it was like for so many of these kids who come forward and no one believes them.
Right. Right. So First of all, let me just say we're going to have links to these articles that you're referencing in the show notes. So if people want to read more about this case and the prior cases, they certainly can. Can I just ask you, did USTA have a role in any of this?
Well, there's a reason why I sued the USTA, and the reason why the USTA has been found guilty on multiple occasions. Most recently with the case with Kylie McKenzie, who's come forward. So incredibly brave of her to do what she's done. But yeah, there's a reason, and they absolutely played a role, and they played a role in making this abuse possible. I mean,
How so?
Burgos Tennis as an academy was propped up and supported by the United States Tennis Association. He was allowed to have teams that competed in USTA events. USTA Northern California administration received a complaint after one of my peers, 6 months before I started being sexually abused, accused and pressed charges against Burgos for molestation, rape, sexual abuse. There was no evidence. He wasn't able to bring evidence forward. And so there were no charges. The charges didn't stick. So he just, was able to get out immediately. The USTA was aware of this, but because they had been supporting him for the past however many years, 7 years after the 2008 trial, they didn't want to look like they were in the wrong. And so they wanted to cover their responsibility for it. And so they, like, one of the USTA administration officials in USTA Northern California went up to my dad at a tennis tournament and cryptically told him, Burgos isn't allowed to be here right now. He's not allowed to be on the premises because he's a very bad person. And then walked away.
Wow.
I'm actually not even, I know a lot of it's public, but because of the lawsuits, but it's like, there are so many communications within the USTA, just like at all points, keep this down low. And if at any point, if they had said to my parents or to anyone else, this is what came to our attention a month ago or now, do with it what you will. They don't even have to say, we're condoning or anything like that. You should be aware of X, Y, and Z. The fact that he was accused again of sexual misconduct. There's no way that any of our parents would have let us continue, but nothing was said. Everything was handled in-house in a way to skirt responsibility and to hopefully minimize their guilt in the entire situation. It had none of the decisions the USTA made were in any way, shape, or form motivated by protecting the kids involved. It was all about covering their ass. That's it.
Yep.
That's all they were interested in.
So
sorry,
a couple things. No, this is good. The reason I ask you that is because I've been doing what I've been doing for 13 years now, and yours is not the first story like this that I've heard. I have said to parents who have been looking at situations for their kids, I want you just to be aware of this. Let me send you some articles, and then you need to make a decision. And the parent's response has been, well, that's never going to happen to my kid. My kid would come forward. My kid wouldn't tolerate that. I'm a good parent. I'm on top of this. I would know if something were happening with my child.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast is because your parents would, of course, feel that same way.
Yeah.
And this still happened to you. And it wasn't due to anything that they did wrong or didn't do right or didn't pay attention to. It was everything to do with the fact that, as you said yourself, Burgos was a professional at abusing children.
Yeah.
And that's all we need to know about that, is
Mhm.
that he was a professional.
Yeah.
And so, to the parents out there, what would you say to them to get them to pay attention to warning signs, whether the signs are coming from somebody like me, whether
Mhm.
they're coming from a governing body, whether they're coming from another parent, another child, their own child? What do you want parents to really hear?
A great question. Where do I start with this? I've done a lot of work um, with other nonprofit organizations focused on preventing victimization, human trafficking, sexual abuse in youth, especially in Marin County and the Bay Area. And one of the things that I like to speak to when I speak to the parents and faculty at schools is there's a really, really fine line and a big difference, despite that fine line, between a trusted adult and a dependent adult, if that makes sense. When your child becomes dependent on a specific person, that's when they become the most vulnerable to being abused. And so to recognize that, like, not only do you have to maintain that open communication, that open pathway between yourself and your child in that relationship so that they can come to you if they want to, you have to realize that they need other outlets that aren't you. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I wish I had had was if I had one friend, one peer that I could call, like that might have been all I needed confidence wise to come out to my parents or to come out to them. If there had been anyone in my life that I feel like I could have communicated that to. So I think that making sure that your kids are well-rounded in the sense that they have a good social network around them, they have trusted adults in their lives, recognize when they become dependent on one specific person, on one specific thing. Please, 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 please don't place any self-worth or any worth on your child based on their results. The one thing that I will always be unbelievably grateful to my father for was the way that he parented me when it came to tennis could be boiled down to, if you win, we go get a pizza, and if you lose, we go get a pizza. And that's it. That's just kind of how it works. There was nothing to do with wins and losses, because the second someone's self-worth gets wrapped up in their tennis results, all the things that we mentioned in my situation are completely on the table.
Mm.
Um, the problem is that we're never going to be able to fully eradicate sexual abuse in this world. It's just where there will be children, there will be predators. Uh, and you need to trust your gut. Trust your gut, maintain those open communications in that relationship, but know that if something goes wrong, which it very well might, I mean, the statistics now are 1 in 3 girls will experience sexual abuse before they're 18. I think it's 1 in 4 boys.
Wow.
And that's a statistic you can follow up with. I work with an organization called Speak Safe, which has all those statistics in plethora. Um, it's so common that it's like this isn't the situation where it's like lightning strikes. It might happen to your child, no matter who they are, how strong they are, how wonderful your relationship is, just might happen. And so as much as I would like us to focus on the preventative aspect too, I want us to focus on the rehabilitation, right?
Mm.
And it's like, if your child falls down and breaks their arm, you're going to be there to help pick them up. And if something horrible like this happens, God forbid, don't get wrapped up in blaming yourself, as hard as that will possibly be. And I can't imagine how difficult that is.
Yeah.
But the more we can take the pressure off of ourselves and the fault off of ourselves, both as victims or as parents to victims, the more we can learn to start using this in a beneficial way and turn this into how can we help others who have been victimized, or how can we start preventing this. And um gosh, I mean, that's a whole whirlwind of topics and ideas and things that I'm passionate about. But it's, if you feel something as a parent, trust your gut, say something, talk to your kid about it. Um, as a teenage boy, anything that my parents said or did should have been followed with like, I'm an idiot, and anything they said was wrong, wrong, wrong. But when it came down to it, if they told me be careful of the snake in the street, if I saw a snake in the street, I would remember that. And I would never admit to them in a million years that I remembered it, but it was there. And so if you care about your child, and if you show them that love and show them that you're there for them, they might not acknowledge it, and that might be super difficult for you to feel like you're being ignored. But just know that it's sinking in. It really is. With love and care, like all the things that you will say to them will sink in, and that's how we can prevent it, honestly. Um, if we can prevent it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the key here, what I'm hearing you say,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong,
Please.
is
Yeah.
you've got to keep the lines of communication open. And I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
If you don't have an open line of communication, you are setting up a situation where something like this could happen and you won't know. And so you've got to check in with your kids. Your mom, as you said, served it up to you. She gave you the opening to tell her what was happening. And it took a minute.
After her telling me, are you sure you're safe? Are you okay? Are you okay? For 7 years, for 10 years, it took that. Like if my parents hadn't beat that into my head about like, we care, are you okay? Are you okay? I would still be holding on to it. There's no way I would have told anyone.
Right. And so the key here is to keep bugging your kids about this stuff. And even when they get annoyed, and even when they tell you, I don't need you, I hate you, stay out of my life, they don't mean that.
No.
They mean it in the moment.
They do. I was about to say that in a way.
Yeah, they mean it in the moment, but your children need you to be the parent. They need you to be the protector. They need you to be the police. They need you to be the border setter, the boundary setter. They need you to check in with them.
And they may not like it at first, but they will respect it.
Eventually. Yeah, it may take till they're 25, but that's okay. That's okay.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
And if I may say one more thing too, one thing that I talk about a lot in the webinars I do with these organizations is the question will come up, well, like, why are you guys talking to us right now? This isn't appropriate for us to talk to our kids about. Like, we don't want to talk to them about sexual abuse. It's not okay.
It's scary.
It's scary. It's inappropriate.
It's inappropriate.
And I'm like, when I was raped, I didn't know what sex was. And it's like, okay, you have two choices then. You can have the hard conversation with them that might be slightly inappropriate, or they can learn the hard way. And it's a really blunt way to put it, but it's the fact of the matter. Is it's like you can have these conversations and they might be difficult and they might be inappropriate, or you leave your child more vulnerable to having it actually happen. And I'm telling you, I mean, it goes without saying, but you'd rather have a conversation about sex than for your child to be raped.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as horrible as that sounds, but it's
hard to get
it's
factual.
Hard to get it through people's heads.
That's right. And again, this is why it was important to me to have you come on and talk about this stuff, because it's one thing for me to say it as, a 60-plus-year-old woman who's already parented her kids into adulthood. And yes, of course, we're always parents, but my kids are not living at home anymore. And, but it's quite another to hear this from somebody who is still a young person. You're 23 years old. This is a recent thing that happened to you. This is a thing that you're still recovering from and probably will always be recovering from and
And
learning how to
imagine what it's gonna be like
manage.
when I have kids, if
Right.
they choose to play tennis.
Yeah. Well, it's not limited to tennis, as we know. I mean,
No,
we've
it's
heard
not.
horror stories in all different youth sports
Yeah,
and not just sports. I mean, we've
yeah,
heard it in religious settings
yeah,
and school settings. And so I don't want this to be, a warning call about tennis. No,
yeah.
it's a warning call anytime your child is being entrusted to the care of an adult that is isolating them from you, the parent. And
I,
yes, I know abuse happens within the family unit as well, and that's a
mhm,
whole separate issue, and we're not going there.
yeah.
But anytime you're entrusting your child to be alone with an adult that is not you, these lines of communication have to be open. Your child has to know from you, whether or not they take you up on it, they have to know from you that you are a safe person to come to if something is going wrong. And, you know, that's all you can do as the parent.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And that's it's such a tough pill to swallow. Like, okay, that's all I can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's all you can do. And the abusers, there's no face to a perpetrator, and there's no face to a victim, is something that we talk about. It doesn't go, and it comes in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
And so that means that your child is vulnerable, no matter who they are, no matter what gender they are, no matter how early they hit puberty, and how big and strong they are, or what their dedication and their intelligence and all these other wonderful qualities that they might possess has nothing to do with you. And then, yeah, the perpetrators can come in all shapes and sizes. Someone who
Yeah.
runs a non-profit. I don't know.
It's a
Keep our
scary
eyes.
world.
It's a
It's a
scary
scary
world.
world,
Yeah,
and all we can do is have the conversations, arm our children with the tools that they need to stand up and to speak out if,
yeah,
God forbid, they're in a situation. Also,
absolutely,
to stand up and speak out for a friend who may come to them.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I want to just say we're going to have a list of resources in the show notes for this
yeah.
episode, which Stevie's going to help me put together because this is his area of expertise, unfortunately and fortunately for us. But utilize the resources, have the conversations with your children, keep the lines of communication open. And most importantly, if your child comes to you with something like this, believe them.
I agree. Yeah, couldn't say it better myself.
Okay. Stevie, we've been going, oh my gosh, almost an hour and a half. This is a really long episode for us. I want to have you back on though, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to and we need to follow up on, and things you hinted at that we can dive into. So we're going to do this again with your permission, but
I would love to.
thank you so much for your honesty, for your willingness to share your story. And I just want to say congratulations to you for figuring out how to turn this horrific thing into something that helps other people. And also, though I haven't met them, congratulations to your parents for
Thank you.
raising such an incredible young man.
That means a
And
lot.
I hope I get to meet them and you in person sometime soon. So if y'all are ever down in SoCal, I hope you'll let me know. But
Absolutely.
wishing you all the success. I hope you have a great next year at St. Mary's.
Thank you.
You thought college tennis was over, and look, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Who doesn't want to go to more tournaments out in the middle of nowhere on Saturdays and Sundays? As we all
Ah,
know as tennis parents, right?
That's right. But
Yeah.
soon enough you'll be in the adult world and you'll be missing this stuff.
Yeah,
So
maybe doing it
yeah.
again. Who knows?
Yeah. All the best. All the best. Thank you so much. To
Thank
my
you, Lisa.
audience, to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces. Parenting Aces is providing this podcast as a public service. Reference to any specific product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Parenting Aces, Lisa Stone, or Fit for Two Inc. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program is not and does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Always do your own due diligence before purchasing, hiring, or using any product, service, or provider.